Hi, I'm Torte de Lini. From the first moment you load into a Deadlock match, Dota players will immediately notice a lot of similarities between Deadlock and the iconic game we've been playing for the last 20 years. But while the newest title might feel familiar at a glance, it has its own distinct set of intricacies and nuances that will require you to adapt. Let me make that a bit easier for you to jump into a match of Deadlock by showing you everything that's similar yet different to the two games. At its core, Deadlock is similar to Dota, where your end goal is to destroy the enemy patron, akin to Dota's Ancient. Most of you already know that you need to farm creeps, destroy towers, and win teamfights to achieve that. Evidently, Deadlock is not a top-down strategy game like Dota, but rather a third-person shooter, so by default the map doesn't suffer from fog of war or needing vision because Deadlock plays at the ground level, but instead the verticality of Deadlock, as well as its many dead ends, cosmic veils, and different alleyways lend itself to making vision and positioning just as important as it is in Dota. Another immediate difference is that the game is played across 4 lanes instead of 3 on a team of 6 instead of 5. This immediately shifts the game to de-emphasize the importance of a mid lane and instead creates equal footing for all lanes to help one another once their own is pushed or a tower is taken. What's more is the map is symmetrical, shifting away from dire and radiant imbalances and instead making the map more recognizable regardless of which side you are on. So universal objectives like Urn of Souls and Roshan, Cold Mid Boss and Deadlock are more evenly contested rather than being an advantage to one team or another. One of the biggest changes in Deadlock is that there are no hard defined roles in the game as there are in Dota, as most heroes can deal damage, provide utility, and scale with levels. There are definitely more late game oriented characters, but the division between supports and core is almost non-existent in Deadlock. This is especially emphasized by the fact that the game doesn't even allow you to directly pick your hero, let alone draft of your team, but rather you can just select your preferences and hope to God you get them. If that wasn't enough, Deadlock also doesn't let you choose your lanes either, and sometimes you'll be in a dual lane or solo. But unlike Dota, that doesn't really matter because both types of lanes will be getting the same amount of experience as their counterparts regardless of who last hits. These changes not only highlight how the developers see these heroes as being able to fit into any role on the team, but also leans on the importance of your itemization and strategy as a team to win your matches rather than games being dictated by the draft like in Dota. Hey, by the way, if you like my Deadlock videos or know me from Dota 2, please trick the algorithm by liking, subscribing, and commenting. Together we'll have the yapping power to confuse the YouTube AI into thinking this topic is the most interesting thing since cloning sheep. In Deadlock, Souls is both your experience and gold. You get level up after reaching a certain total Souls threshold, but Souls are also a currency you can spend in the shop to buy items that make you stronger or give you extra active abilities. Since the two core Dota progression concepts are combined into one, it should be immediately clear how important it is. Leveling up in Deadlock does not always grant you additional power increases like attribute stats in Dota 2. Instead, each level up, meaning you've collected enough souls, can grant you an ability unlock to access one of your 4 abilities and subsequently ability points to scale up your abilities. Also, upgrading abilities works differently from Dota 2. The first upgrade for an ability costs 1 AP, second one costs 2 AP, and the last upgrade will require 5 full ability points. So while you may earn additional ability points with each level up, the actual capability you might want to upgrade an ability is not available until you collect more souls and level up again. That said, these upgrades are usually a powerful improvement to the ability that can range from reduced cooldown, stronger effects, or additional offerings when using the ability. It's not like in Dota 2 where there is a scaling improvement with each level, so upgrading your abilities heavily determines how you want to play and what playstyle you're emphasizing in Deadlock. For example, maxing out Bit Bop's hook means you are ganking a lot of your abilities for spirit damage based kills, whereas upgrading your 4th ability, Hyper Beam, means you are more focused on team fighting and relying on your teammates for setups instead. The other way of making your hero stronger, besides leveling up, is to spend souls on items. Unlike Dota, where all inventory item slots are the same, in Deadlock there are 3 distinct item categories: weapon, vitality, and spirit. With 4 inventory slots per category, you get a total of 12 initial total slots. Similar to Dota, certain attributes from items grant you additional damage and values like armor and attack speed. In Deadlock, it is much simpler. 1. Weapon items will grant you extra weapon and melee damage, as well as some damage dealing effects. 2. Vitality items will usually provide your hero with extra health, defense, and mobility. This is also the category where you'll find most movement speed and utility based items like Unstoppable, which is like Blacking Bar for Dota 2, or Shadow Weave, which is kind of like Shadow Blade. Now number 3, Spirit is a bit different. Generally speaking, it improves the effectiveness of your items and abilities. Most damage from abilities scale with Spirit power, but Spirit can also increase the duration of your crowd control spells, increase AoE or amplify heals. Some heroes even have their base stats influenced by Spirit power. For example, Haze is kind of like a sneaky weapon damage dealing assassin, actually gets extra magazine capacity and ammo on her weapons with extra Spirit power. This is indicated by a purple star symbol on the hero page. So Spirit is not like spell amplification in Dota, but actually so much more. Subsequently, the item shop might also seem just as overwhelming as Dota, but it actually is much more directional, whereas Dota 2's only has 2 tabs, basics and upgrades. As mentioned, the item shop has 3 categories of items that summarize their main intent: weapon, spirit, and vitality. But what's more is items are tranched into only 4 tiers of prices, unlike Dota 2's multitude of different costs per item. These costs signal to the player what is feasible to reach during a key part of a match and what might force them to farm up for it. For example, during the laning stage, 500 cost items are much more feasible when the only souls available are from troopers. Alternatively, the 3000 cost items are much easier to reach once additional sources spawn, like boxes, neutrals, and Urn of Souls. So the cost of items are heavily dictated by your rate of farming and thus determine if these items are early game, mid game, or late game items. While the 12 initial inventory slots may seem like it makes the game more complicated than Dota 2, it's actually much more user friendly because the game orients you to invest your souls across all 3 categories instead of the lack of direction in Dota. You will soon find out that if you only buy weapon based items, you will be maxed out quickly and must consider vitality and spirit items to complement your weapon focused build. Items like bullet resist shredder might be a spirit based item, but it clearly shows that it is meant to enable you to do more weapon damage. So despite only being able to buy 4 items per category, the other categories help orient players on how to keep a good balance of what the hero needs and wants to perform in a match. To add, there are also 4 additional flex slots that can fit an item from any category. These slots unlock when your team completes map objectives. This additional incentive means that the game is pushing players to complete objectives rather than focusing on kills. This is something that Dota lacks in instruction for the player, where if you don't take objectives and just regularly go around killing, sometimes the enemy team will eventually catch up and destroy you. This confusion frustrated a lot of players, whereas in Deadlock, if you don't take objectives, you will find yourself stocking up on too many souls and no inventory slots to spend on items. In Deadlock, enemies can contest and deny the soul orb just like in Dota 2. The key difference here is that denying in Deadlock grants the enemy souls instead of you, but also that denying can only occur when a floating souls orb appears above a slayed trooper. So by slaying the trooper, you will get a portion of its soul, and then to ensure you get the rest, you need to secure the floating orb or your enemy will. However, if no one does, then the floating souls orb will go to you by default. But there is actually a way to prevent enemies from getting a chance to deny your souls. If you last hit a trooper with a melee attack, the game fully skips the soul orb part of the equation, ensuring you get 100% of the bounty. While lanes are predetermined by the game, being a solo laner versus a dual laner has marginal differences in terms of earned souls. For the first 10 minutes of the game, the soul earnings are duplicated rather than divided between the ally heroes in the lane. That means both you and your lane partner get the same amount of souls as long as you are close enough to the slayed troopers. If there are 3 allies in a lane, the souls are split up a bit. By comparison, in Dota 2, a support roaming to another lane can be beneficial as it allows cores to soak up some extra solo experience. However, in Deadlock, that would just create a disadvantage. Earning souls is actually much easier in Dota. In Dota, it's pretty much killing heroes, taking objectives, and farming the jungle. And Deadlock has that too, but some key differences. 1. You cannot stack neutral camps. 2. neutral camps respawn on a timer after you've killed them. 3. Neutral camps are highlighted on the minimap and neutral camp indicators are shared among both teams. So if you pay attention to the minimap, you can notice which camps are being taken and know exactly where at least one of the enemy heroes are. What's more is that while farming neutral camps can help you stay afloat or ahead in net worth, it also puts you in a precarious position of either farming enough souls to spend that unsecured souls amount or taking the risk of losing it by engaging in a fight that is occurring nearby. Another way to get some extra souls is to deliver the soul urn. It is an objective that starts spawning at the 10-minute mark in one of the side lanes, and you basically need to get it from one side of the map to the other without getting killed. While carrying the urn, you are disarmed and can't use your abilities, so delivering the urn should typically be done when at least a couple of lanes are pushed in and you see enemy heroes dealing with it. In Dota 2, the most common form of getting back to your lane or to gank a lane is through town portal scrolls. In Deadlock, we have something called transit lines, which you can use to reach the lanes longitudinally from spawn. Unlike Dota, any damage you take while riding the rail in the first 3 seconds of riding it will result in you getting stunned. Think of it as kind of like a TP cancel, but the enemy doesn't actually need to use an interrupting ability. Any damage will do. So not only do the rail rotations take longer, and not only do they run along the narrow line from and to the base, they are also a lot easier to interrupt, and the stun you receive is usually more than enough to kill you. Alternatively, to maneuver the map laterally, the emphasis on the movement of your hero is important, as well as using all the different elements on the map to reach your destination. Elements like bounce pads and ropes to reach rooftops and lanes quickly. Underground paths and teleport stations can also help you travel across large distances very fast. Lastly, the most important part of Deadlock is information in your HUD. In many ways, when you play Dota 2, you have to infer a lot of information from your enemy, how ahead or behind they are in gold and net worth, if their ultimate is still on cooldown, etc. In Deadlock, all the information is readily available, including if the enemy has their ultimate ability up and each player's individual soul's net worth. What's more is if you press the Alt key, you can also see how far ahead they are in ability points, i.e. levels, and their item split. Cool, so in many ways, Deadlock is a brand new game that takes a lot from Dota, but also looks to break past a lot of things that made Dota difficult for new players to jump in and interpret what they need to do. A lot of what's in Dota that is missing in Deadlock has been adjusted. So instead of having, let's say, buyback options for the player to interpret when to use it best, Deadlock instead adds, let's say, 2 shrines and 2 stages of the patron to give the losing team multiple chances to respawn and try to defend. A lot of what Deadlock does is remove a lot of difficult decisions and responsibilities and depth of knowledge that was needed to at least play Dota, and essentially reframe those layers in Deadlock into an organic pace and limitations of the game. From category inventory slots to more emphasis from objectives than kills, Deadlock really wants players to be able to jump into the game of Deadlock without feeling intimidated by the idea that they don't know exactly everything that is happening. For Dota players, you're going to see a lot of items and hero abilities throughout this game, but that doesn't mean that Deadlock is essentially mimicking Dota, but rather draws a lot from what makes Dota great and tries to make MOBAs as a whole more comfortable to get into for a new generation of players.